Hey everybody, welcome to Good Question. This is a show where you pick the topics and then we have a conversation about it. Before I introduce my panel, I know, who are they? What are they doing here? We have a couple of quick announcements. First of all, like and subscribe if you've been enjoying this channel. This allows our channel to push out into YouTube and continue to exist. Also, this Sunday, I'm going to be in Los Angeles. A couple of other Swedenborg Foundation people there too. Check the link in the description if you want to come hang out with us. We'll be there. It should be a fun way to connect to you, the audience, even more. But now back to connecting with you through questions right now. Okay, here's the panel. First is me. My name is Curtis, and I'm the host of Swedenborgian Life. Then we have Cara Dom, Latin consultant for the New Century Edition. To her left, Dr. Jonathan Rose, who is a series editor of the New Century Edition. And then to his left, we have Chelsea Odner, writer for Swedenborgian Life. Can't say enough how great it is for you, having you all here, so thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So what we're going to do together is talk about whatever you guys ask us to talk about. So let's see, what is our very first good question today? Bonnie Bowers asks, what happens if you want to see someone in the afterlife when you're there and they don't want to see you? So in case somebody, you were just tuning in and didn't know what this show is, this is the kind of thing we talk about here. And so here we have a situation where Swedenborg sets out this principle saying that thought brings presence in the afterlife. The distance is only an appearance, really. The internal states can bring you closer and farther. So he describes things like, it's so great, when you want to see someone, you can be right there. But here we have this question of, okay, I can see somebody wants to, like on my spiritual phone, I guess I'm getting a notification, this person wants to be present with me, but I don't want to talk to them. And I knew them in high school. They were weird. So what happens then? So does anybody have any thoughts on that?
You can start us off.
Okay. One thing is that in specific about couples, Swedenborg says that couples get together, and he makes this odd statement that sometimes one person separates from the other, if they're somewhat incompatible spiritually or something, after they've been together for a while. Yes, right. And after they've been together for a while exploring the relationship, and they find out that they're somewhat incompatible, then one will separate from the other, or the other will separate from the first person, or they separate mutually. And I don't know how you tell the difference, but so there are certain things that suggest that even if, like, there was a crime committed or something like that, it seems like there's a certain importance in working things out in a kind of a safe environment. I mean, there's angels around and stuff like that, and so it may have to be that someone sees someone else, but it's under kind of a controlled environment. But if the heart and the mind is really facing in a different direction, Swedenborg says that even sometimes in mid-conversation, it might happen to you watching the show, that you just disappear. Like one person will just disappear because their mind and their heart is somewhere else.
Let's look at our viewer metrics to see if anyone disappeared.
Did that happen? It was a big drop-off right there.
Yeah, I would think it would be about usefulness. Like if there's some usefulness in the two getting together, even though one of them didn't think they wanted to.
Right.
It would happen anyway if there was something important to be accomplished by it.
That's a good point.
But I never thought about this.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
That's a good point.
And probably
one of the show.
Not by extension pointless suffering or so. I don't think the other world is about pointless suffering.
Right. Certainly, Swedenborg has a very vivid description of people who meet in the afterlife, one having killed the other one.
That's
and
right.
The one who committed the murder, saying, I didn't do anything. And then the very person they killed is like, in one dramatic account, he said, look, what did you do to me? And so at that point, that you can see how somebody's got to meet the person, even if they didn't want to see it.
And some, that can cause a rift in a relationship.
The one time, remember when you killed me?
Yeah. I guess to throw a thought in, just that, it reminds me of reconciliation, or, you think it seems like that sort of mediation and reconciliation seems like a sort of heavenly work that people do in our world nowadays that I don't think has been long around or something necessarily in a very enlightened way. I don't know. I'm making huge judgments on centuries that I'm not familiar with, but just that like what Cara was saying of you not wanting to, well, there might be a value to it or something, and the angels are going to, or the support systems that you have are going to lead you through that carefully.
Yeah, that makes me think of Swedenborg asserting over and over that sort of the intention is everything in a deed like that. And I know that my mom and grandmother were recently watching. There's some show out. I don't even remember the name of it, but it's all about those kind of reconciliations that you were
Like
mentioning.
restorative justice.
There was
Yeah.
like somebody who had shot a police officer, but the police officer didn't die, and like 15 years later, they were going to meet and talk it out, and people watching the show said it was really moving. So if we're getting to that point on Earth, right? You think it's got to be there. Spiritual world, that there's some good reason to meet. But then on the other hand, I'm sure that Swedenborg talks about all kinds of people who are immersed in hellish mindset, like wanting to, if I could just get in with the angels, I would mess them up in this way, but they don't get to move.
They don't get to just do that. Right.
So there's some very complex system.
Right.
There.
Regulated. Yeah.
And it strikes me, it's a little heartbreaking, but in relationships, often one person, it may be rare that two people want the relationship exactly the same amount. Right. You know what I mean? Like, or sometimes there's kind of a pursuit, and then the pursuit goes the other way, or something. And I imagine all that becomes clear in that honest world where you can really see what your own heart and feelings are. What's drawing you to the person, or making you not want to interact with them, and what's going on with them, and all that. So I think all that kind of thing comes to light.
Yeah.
But there's a nice kind of, the spiritual world is great compared to this world in the sense that you really end up with people you love and feel extremely comfortable with.
Not so bad.
Yeah, it goes along with the usefulness thing, but that was just reminding me of this phrase in Heaven and Hell, I think, where he says, like is drawn towards like, not by their own will, but by the Lord. So, and that was what I was just thinking about, was like, I don't even know what I want half the time.
Right.
Like I'm not wise to my own, I can doing the best I can or whatever. But so just having that trust in God, you live in that environment in a way that we aren't necessarily as tuned into here. So, but knowing that that's the way the Lord is organizing it.
Great. Yes. Okay. Cool.
That's a good
question,
question.
Bonnie. Way to start it off strong. It's only up from here. Let's see the next good question. Kendall M. asks, according to Swedenborg, where did Jesus go during the 3 days between his crucifixion and resurrection? We're going from talking about spiritual world mechanics to the explanation of Christian theology. We're starting to hit all our major Swedenborg points here. So this is
That's right.
And the cool thing is, like, Swedenborg's explanations for these kinds of things, I find, extend way beyond people who are just interested in Christian theology. These are often at the root of existence. What's this one? What's Jesus doing? Why didn't he just resurrect right away? Why have those 3 days where there was so much tension and anxiety in the people that he cared about? Is it symbolic? What's it all about? Jonathan, let's start with you on this.
Okay,
one.
all right.
I see you writing something.
Yes,
so
I'm
you
willing
thought
to.
of something. Yeah.
I have
it just says,
no idea.
Did I leave the oven on?
Did I leave the oven?
Note to self. Swedenborg doesn't talk expressly, as far as I know, about those 3 days, but there's a lot of stuff, quite a bit of stuff in the Bible about the idea. There's some statement in the epistles that Jesus didn't just ascend, but he also descended and set the captives free, kind of thing, the harrowing of hell, they call it sometimes, that he released people, and there's prophecies in the Old Testament that sound like that's going to happen. And I do think that at some point in there, the Lord did release all these people from from what's called the lower earth. There's this weird part of the world of spirits that's...
We did shows about it.
Yeah,
we did a couple of shows about it. I don't know what they're called, but
Souls Under the Altar.
Souls Under the Altar,
That's
Book
right.
of Revelation series. So check that out.
That's right. And so part of Jesus' whole mission was to set these people free who were good people, but they'd been kind of boxed in with their beliefs, or in one way or another. They weren't very free. And so a big part of his mission was to set those people free. And you even see a little hint of this, and we touched on this in one show, I remember, in Matthew, after the crucifixion, the people are seen coming up out of their graves. You know, that weird little scene, and they're seen in the holy city. It says many of the saints or something. Well, I think that's actually about the Lord releasing these people from that lower earth. It was in the spiritual world, like Matthew, or had a spiritual experience or something and saw these people rising up. So I definitely think there was some such liberation going on at at that time, I think various little things, you put the pieces together.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine he was doing, was liberating people. I also wanted to add that really it says 3 days, but you do the math, it was about 34 hours or something, like he couldn't stay away long. I just don't think he could stay away long. Yeah. It's like Friday afternoon,
Friday
he's crucified, and then Sunday morning, like crack of dawn. It's not like 72 hours. It's it's about half that. Like he's just like, okay, that's enough time apart. Let's go to the next phase.
Fascinating. And, it's interesting that Swedenborg's description of Jesus' mission is so complex and so full, that he wasn't just there to show the people who saw him do the miracles. It wasn't just there to establish a set of teachings, that he was actually sort of rewriting the way that heaven and the human race can even interact with the divine in the first place, and that the why come as a person and then get crucified and come back as a spirit sort of person, the glorification, that was of great importance, the uniting of the divine and the human. So there's just all this emphasis placed on the things he did around that. So it must be that the method is lending itself to these very complicated tasks that he's doing. Okay.
I'm just having a wild thought. I don't know if it fits, but there's an interesting thing, like the idea that Jesus dealt with the worst spirits first, when he was young, and kind of worked his way up. I also wonder whether in that transition, just after he left the flesh, he took the flesh with him, but you know what I mean? He left this physical world in that, embodied way here or something. Was he able to access those regions better, having just left the flesh, like part of his purification before he was fully ascended? He says, touch me not fully ascended yet or something, which it kind of baffles me. But does he have a connection to some area where he's able to set people free? He can get there in that little time right after he's crucified, because he still has some of the kind of fleshly mind or the worldliness or something around himself. And that very act of love that he does in releasing those captives further, cranks up his ascension and, even makes him even more divine or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just making stuff up.
No, hey, that's how's that different than our MO?
We're just like theorizing from Swedenborg, I guess, kind of. And I feel like that's the only thought that occurs to me with that, is that the whole, like you were saying, the whole process of him coming into the world and living a life here was to follow the divine design. And so there's like, I'm not familiar with the divine design exactly after you die. Like what's the divine design of that passage from earth to heaven, even though obviously he was doing it in a more complete way than any human does. So I don't know how that relates, but something like that. Yeah,
that's right. The order of it. That's right.
But for a reason, like the same kind of reason where it's like, why do you have a little pipe going up from your lungs to your mouth? Like there's a very specific reason for it.
Yeah.
There's got to be some I like that. Okay.
I just want to say that what comes to mind for me is that Swedenborg does talk about when humans die, and they have this 3-day break between death and waking up in the spiritual world. So, like, I don't have anything in my mind about what he says about Jesus's experience of that, but he does talk about the human thing.
Yeah.
And we're created in the image and likeness of God, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't even know what Swedenborg says about where we are floating around in some kind of peaceful state. Is that when we're with the highest angels?
I think so,
in that sort of 3 days before we come to consciousness in the next realm. But
and I think
it's a parallel of some kind.
Right. I think we actually come down to consciousness, like we're in this elevated consciousness, the highest angels, and then we sort of go through the pinball machine and come back down to our own life after the 3 days kind of thing.
I don't want to come back down from this cloud. It's taken me all this. That's from Bush. That's a great question, Kendall. So you got us speculating and having fun. So much appreciated. Let's take a look at the next one. Marilyn Hill asks, is there still going to be a rapture? I remember years ago someone predicted when the rapture was going to take place, and the date came and went, and it didn't happen. When was it? It was
Not too long ago.
2015, May something. 2015.
Was it that long ago? 2015.
I think
Yeah,
it was.
that's probably right. It seems like yesterday that I was. I think I mentioned this on a recent News from Heaven. That I would drive up. There's like I-95, here, where they had billboards that were very much the rapture. Here's the date and the time. And I even remember reading an article about the guy who predicted that, the guy on Family Radio, and I felt sorry for him. I mean, because all these people were around him to make fun of him when it didn't happen, so they mercilessly made fun of him. Although it's his. It could have been he was trying to make it in good faith. It definitely messed over a lot of people because so many people listening to that radio station sold all their stuff and were basically wrecked the future of their life, and now I don't know where they are now. But I did feel a little sorry for that guy either way. But so, obviously, that wasn't quite right. I saw this chart around that time of the rapture being predicted just about every year since the time of Christ. Like, there have been huge predictions all the time. The year 2000, back. So, is there such a thing? And what could be pushing people to continue to make these, or what's the connection to that idea? So, has anyone been raptured, or is it?
I don't think so. Does that word even occur in the Bible?
Not per se.
We talked. I know in one of our Swedenborgian life shows, and I can't remember which right now. One of the ones about Jesus is we talk about. We went through that process. Maybe blanking on the name, but we went through the sort of one will be left and one will be, and the clothes will be something, and the
don't go back to get your coat.
Yeah, what Jesus says
the rooftop,
about that.
Go back to love.
Right.
Yeah, you could just make up a title. Who knows if they'll really Google
I know it says Jesus. I forget what it is. End times.
End times in Jesus
Christ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
That's my contribution.
Yeah, there were really big predictions in, I think it was 1859, 1860 about the rapture, and there's a whole lot of people who sold their property and all, and they thought it would happen in 1859 or whenever it was, and then it didn't. And then he said, "Oh no, I was wrong. I was off by a year."
Was that scary for you as a kid?
Yeah, that was.
I was like pondering
I remember,
that joke. Is that appropriate or inappropriate?
I remember my grandparents being very upset about it. And
inappropriate.
So. The rapture is actually, in some ways, it's sort of gained in popularity in the 20th century. Like it really became a bigger idea than it used to be, and a lot of Left Behind series, movies, book series about the rapture and the idea of the rapture, and a lot of preaching about that. Swedenborg wrote a book called The Last Judgment, where he kind of addresses this without using the word rapture.
Yeah.
Right.
But he says that the physical universe is not going to stop. The world is not going to be destroyed. The human race is not going to come to an end. There's not going to be this massive destruction. That's not a correct understanding of what's in Scripture. It would be too much to try to do in a brief time for a show like this. But that 1 Thessalonians 4:17, which is a key passage for the rapture, about how we'll be caught up in the air.
Right.
Those who sleep, will go first, and so on. Will meet with the Lord in the air. And then Paul says, "So comfort one another with these words." Well, people have terrified each other with these words. So they haven't really followed the letter of Paul, in the way that's been handled. What would be comforting about that? To be caught up in the clouds and be in the air with Jesus and to always be with him. And I can't do justice to it quickly, but the idea there is the air is similar to the clouds in which Jesus is going to come. Those are symbols. They're correspondences of, actually, sounds very strange to say, you don't have to believe me, but of Scripture. Mm-hmm. And it's actually about how angels and people will be connected through the truth and through Scripture. That's how those who sleep are those who have already died. They'll be together with us and will be with the Lord, who is the Word, through the medium of Scripture. That's actually what 1 Thessalonians is talking about, I believe. And that's very different than a physical rapture. It is a being caught up. It's having a new kind of connection with heaven, which is really what these shows are all about. Yeah. But it's not I don't need to pay the mortgage because on such and such a date, I'll be hoovered out of my shoes on the highway or something like that.
Would be nice. to not have to worry about the mortgage. I
Yeah.
just thought when you said that.
I can see that it's a very attractive thought of just like, oh, let's just wipe the slate clean and
Well,
start again. you know?
Somebody told me that there's a lot of businesses for like pet care post
Yeah,
Rapture.
post-rapture. That's
If
right.
your pet doesn't go with you,
Yeah, like the people who are left behind will take care of
Surely
your pets
all the
for
pets
you.
would go and the people would be left behind.
I know I'm not going to get taken. I at least want to set myself up financially by caring for your pets.
Yes, exactly. Anyway.
Well, and
hard.
it's true that people use that idea because there's such an existential threat in it. People will use that to get people to behave in certain ways. They'll say,
Right.
you know, like, don't worry about solving these particular problems the human race is facing because we'll all be out of here soon. Don't
Yeah.
worry about saving your money. Give it to us because we'll all be out of here soon. It's a very potent tool for manipulation. And I think it was maybe you, maybe Jonathan, or maybe some other Swedenborg scholar saying Swedenborg is actually unique in his interpretation of the Last Judgment, which is there's a lot of people who say all kinds of things. People have predicted that the end times Revelation stuff is about events in this world, but nobody says it already happened and it happened in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
That's a Swedenborg.
Right.
Only here can you get that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of passages that have been interpreted to be about the rapture and the Last Judgment, if you look at them in the Bible, they talk about your behavior. You should behave well, you know, and the idea that you should comfort one another with these words. You know, that there's a comfort to the idea that we'll be closer to heaven, and it matters how we live. So that's, you know, it's interesting that people turn that around to say, it doesn't matter how you live because the rapture is going to happen. And yet the Bible's message is, it does matter how you live because the Lord is coming and you want to be on that bus, you know?
Awesome. Well, thanks for the question. Let's take a look at the next good one. This is from Candace Andrea. It says, what about suicide? I've been told my mom is in hell, but I believe in God's mercy, love, and understanding. Will I see my mom again? So assuming that means that your mother took her own life, we're so sorry to hear that. And
It's got to be rough.
we've definitely made videos on this channel about suicide. So what's all of your understanding about it? Because there is, I think the backdrop is I think is a Catholic teaching. Maybe there's a number of Christian denominations that teaches that suicide is an automatic ticket to hell. That if somebody has killed themselves, they've broken the commandments, and so they're going to hell. What do you see? How do you see that in Swedenborg's worldview?
Well, a first thing that comes to my mind is his discussion of the fact that when we are in a state of mental incapacitation or even physical, some
your
physical
rationality is
states and
impaired,
irrationality.
right.
Yeah, when rationality is impaired, then we are not held spiritually responsible for what goes on.
Yeah.
Because we're not all there and we're not all present. And so to me, that's God's mercy, love, and understanding. And on the other side, your mom will, get to know herself and get to really be clear about who she is and what her life choices are, and then she'll be in the right place for her.
Yeah, and I think
That's how I
also
see it.
most people, or like one of the things Swedenborg says is we're not actually, if I'm say this right, not condemned or saved by our actions. Like we're not it's the whole arc of our intention and our lives, and that's something the Lord knows and is leading us on continuously. So if somebody, if it's like, it's so easy for somebody to say somebody's in hell based on this one specific action. You're missing 99.9% of that person's life, and I would guess that Candace knows pretty well, I don't know, knows something maybe more about her mom's heart than these other people do, and could trust that gut of like, that's who your mom really is.
Yeah, that's a great point that you made there, because there's no action that you can know somebody went to hell because of. Murder, anything,
No.
drop a bomb on people. You can't know because, again, it's motivation and how much was, Swedenborg talks about evil spirits rushing in and trying to get people to do things just like that. So it's definitely, you can't pick apart any action and say, this means you go somewhere. Because as you said, where we go is a result of who we are based on what we love over the course of a long life of choosing things. And whenever you have, we get back to the healthy state that you're talking about. Whenever we have this discussion about suicide, I'm always worried, then people are going to think, suicide is a way out because there's no consequences to it. Swedenborg, it just has a couple of obscure references to it where somebody had committed suicide and was having trouble ridding themselves of the instrument for it. So there's definitely it's not like you're going to just, that was a great, now I've got these angels and now I've solved all my problems. But I don't get any sense that it's a permanent effect. I think you continue to process. I don't, I guess what I want to say is like, if you're feeling despair, it's not like a way out. But if you love somebody who has done it, it doesn't mean they're locked out.
Right. And I love the idea that Swedenborg says that everybody makes a choice about heaven and hell. Nobody's cast in against their will or something. It's just choices that people make, and they have to make them again and again in the other world, to sort of reinforce it or say, oh no, I want to change my mind. Because the whole thing is set up for us to change, if we're on a bad path or we ended up in a difficult mental or emotional state or something like that. Hey, let's try to heal that. Let's get that better. I do believe there's a lot about, like pressure from evil spirits.
Yeah,
I think lots of people feel that of they want you to kill yourself, and sometimes that may be overwhelming or something. Another teaching that comes to mind is that, which is really astonishing, I've been reflecting on this lately, that everyone in the spiritual world is a welcome guest. Everyone is greeted with love. They're welcome.
Yeah.
Nobody comes and say, wait, it's not your time. What are you doing here? So, at least that's what I read in Swedenborg. Like everybody's greeted with this beautiful kind of love. People's deaths, like people in the other life. You see this in NDEs, don't you? That people on the other side seem to know when we're going to die or whether it's our time or not. That kind of stuff. Like that information is known up there, so they can get ready. And this is a weird way to put it, but even if someone did go to hell, you would still see them again because they come back out of that state. Like for you to be able to process the relationship and everything. Yes, you'll absolutely see your mom again. And I don't think she's in what do I know? But I don't think she's automatically in hell for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I, it's hard because it's just text, so you don't know. But like what I see in this is like that wasn't who my mom was. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like I believe in God's mercy, love, and understanding that
right.
God would get that this was this horrible thing that took her over, but it's not who she is. Right. And if that's what you're feeling, then your mom's not in hell. I think that this idea that's gotten in and poisoned is like even somebody who was good, and we all have our own flaws or whatever, but can get trapped and they make this big mistake and then they're locked out forever, which is this horrific idea that's not true. That's not at all consistent with the spiritual world that Swedenborg describes.
Right.
You have to get to hell. And I think somebody said this on the show. You have to be very deliberate and try very hard to get to hell. You have to willfully embrace harming other people and do it habitually and reject. I mean, it's not
care about that above all else.
You can't get into a dark place and do something that you might not have done if you were thinking straight, and then you're cut off for that. That's not exactly. That's not what mercy, love, and understanding are.
I'm with you on the loving, the mercy, love, and understanding. I think keeping your eye on that, like that will help you figure out. I think that's at the core of everything. So that helps you figure out would it be the case that you'd automatically be condemned for one act that can take a split second.
And we're not going to, if we as people can see like there's something wrong with this situation logically, like it's not fair that this happened because God is going to be like that. There's tons of people who seem to describe God as just like really out of touch, arbitrary, by the book, even though the laws were made in the 1830s when there were horses and carriages and that's why you can't. God is going to be, cares so much more about everybody being happy than we do. Even people we think we love, God more cares about their happiness. So it's not like, this person's going to slip through the cracks of a system. And so it does upset me when religious stuff will paint God as like, and even like people with this telling people that the people they love are in hell. We had this video that just was really popular over the weekend.
How does that
and
serve
just like
you?
some stupid people were on there. Like somebody had shared something about suicide, and these people were like, "Your mom's burning," or not. I don't even think it was mom. It was somebody like, "So they're burning right now. You should kill yourself." This is really. We don't know if they're like 12-year-old idiots at their computer or what, but. This is the kind of thing that religious people will sometimes do. It's just that they're in hell because those people aren't thinking at all about the person or the person they're harming. It's just like, here's my little system of how I know the world works or fear or whatever it is. But that's not what God is. It's not what love is. It's not what wisdom is. And God is not going to be, we're not going to get to sit here and look at God and be like, God's got some real blind spots here. There's no way. There's no way. Okay. So thanks, Candace, for being willing to share that, and again, we're all here for you. Just let us know, and that brings us right to our halfway through. So I thought, the fun of this show is we get to see into what people are feeling and thinking, and we take it one step further here. We like to play a little clip from one of you, from somebody who's been watching the show. This is again from our event we had in Manhattan a little while ago. We filmed a few people. We're hoping to do that in LA too. If you want to come to LA, do that. But this was Stephanie Mo Davis, and she talked a little bit about what finding Swedenborg's ideas have meant to her, and it was loud in that room. I said, let's just film in this loud room, and so we have to put subtitles on it. So you hear a bit of chatter, but you can hear her as well. So let's take a look at that, then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Great.
So I found Off the Left Eye about 6 months ago, and it was exceptionally valuable to me because I had gone through a really massive spiritual awakening, and I felt very isolated and very lonely with sharing my experience. There was a lot of people who didn't have the experience themselves, and when people can't relate, it's hard for them to relate to something that's very out of the box and unusual. And I stumbled across your channel, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone. And at a time where I was very isolated, trying to find if anyone else out there had my experiences, hearing you explain Swedenborgian's experience and some of the books that I was drawn to just made me feel like I wasn't alone, honestly. And it really gave me hope that I could find a community that I'd be able to grow with, and I wouldn't be judged, I wouldn't be mislabeled as being crazy or confused, and I could find a way to express my spiritual and my mystical side along with the workings of the Bible and Swedenborg's materials. So I have a long history in what's called the New Age community. It started when I was 19, when I took my first yoga class, and I became pretty much obsessed with the practice of yoga to the extent that I wanted my whole life to be revolved around yoga. And not only did I develop a strong community and open several yoga studios, I just found that everything about my life was about self-improvement and so much self-awareness to the extent that I was leaving God out of the picture. And this was starting to be a concern for me. And actually, when I did have that profound spiritual awakening, I realized that God comes first, but my spiritual experience needed to be valued as well, but it didn't need to be the other way around. So I'm trying to bridge that gap between honoring my spiritual nature and the aspects of the mystical realm and the spiritual realm, which I have the pleasure to be involved with quite a bit. For me, it's difficult to stay very grounded because I am a very spiritual person. So to find this merger, the coalesced environment of the spiritual with the biblical is just, to me, it feels like a dream come true because I felt before that it was one or the other. And that's a very hard place to be. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance when you feel like it has to be one or the other. So for me to have these two worlds merge is where it just has made such a profound difference to me. So thank you so much.
So doing this YouTube channel, at times, trying to get Swedenborg out onto the internet, it could be like, who's ever going to want something that's like Christian and spiritual and this other thing at the same time? But I love what she's saying there about this was something that could honor both sides of it and give them a space to live together. Mm-hmm. Which I think Swedenborg does give spaces where things you think could never live together, and not in a way that's just sort of ignoring parts of both, but really like celebrating, and here's how they fit legitimately together. So to me, that was cool. Do you guys have any reactions to that?
Yeah, I do. I feel like, Swedenborg has definitely been that bridge, and particularly for me with yoga as well. And I love just the other day I was reading Swedenborg, and and then also reading a book about meditation from a yoga perspective, and it was talking about Kundalini Shakti and this whole process, and it's like, it all makes sense in my mind from a Swedenborgian basis, or something, which is just like, what else would? Like, who else would put this book about Kundalini Shakti and the Bible next to each other and be like, they're going to get along well, but like Swedenborg just kind of makes them all make sense in a way that adds so much more depth and, I don't know, life and interest and cool stuff. It's in an upcoming News from Heaven show that you did that I got to see, that talks about light, and understanding light, truth as light, but also how it's sort of like it reflects our body, like our nervous system and, like the fibers in us. And so like, that also just is very cool to think about that, and yoga. So like there's the whole body angle of that analogy that Swedenborg emphasizes is also part of what bridges that in a really cool way for me. Anyway.
Awesome. Yeah.
I liked her point about self-improvement, and just very interesting the way she said it, because like the idea is great, and the idea of working on we have to work on ourselves and stuff like that, but it felt like she was saying there was a piece missing if it's just really self aware and self improvement. And I feel like I've spent time there, and I feel like I know a lot of people who've been stuck, you read all the self-help books or something like that, and yet you're still kind of miserable and not a great person to be around, or whatever. And like you, Curtis, I just love that idea of the spiritual and the biblical is something we care very much about on this channel, is like reconcile. We were talking about reconciliation before, reconciling things that have been kind of estranged in the world culture in a lot of different areas, it seems like, and so it was very heartwarming to hear that had solved the kind of cognitive dissonance for her.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that was very moving to me, because having grown up Swedenborgian all along, I didn't realize till late in life that this could be a problem. The whole mysticism did not play well with the Bible. Mm-hmm. That was just the air that I breathed growing up. Yeah. And so to have people finding it as like this wonderful solution to a dilemma they've been having is just so cool to hear about.
Well, and there's proof that, microphone, that you guys help us do this, but you give us more insight into what is valuable about the content. I feel like since going online with Swedenborg, my appreciation for the value of it has gone up so much, because I see the way it can be applied. Like you're saying, recognize things that I didn't realize about it before. So together, we are making good conversations. Okay, let's get rolling with another question. Let's see what we had. None of your beeswax asks, serious question, is there soul sex? My son in heaven, and I'm wondering about new dates and a wife over there, since he meets so many new friends.
Very sweet.
Yes. Yes, right. So, is it just angels and you don't have sex, or is there like the analog to that, or the next step, or what's going on with this? And Swedenborg says yes.
Right. The short answer is yes.
Yeah. There is soul sex.
And doesn't this represent a sort of joining of things in this way we were just talking about? Because it's like, there's heaven and religiousness, but sex is evil, and you've got to get it, and you don't talk about it, but there's a thing you leave behind. But yet to Swedenborg, it's within certain situations. He talks about it specifically in the context of married partners in a committed relationship. But to him, that relationship and sex itself is like this part of the most important thing that can happen, and the greatest happiness, even within heaven, where there's Bible and God and angels and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right. It really kind of opened my eyes to the idea, because there's a weird sort of I don't know, that somehow that idea is, the way that when you breathe, part of the problem of breathing carbon monoxide is that your body would actually rather take in carbon monoxide than
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. That's the problem, is that there's plenty of carbon dioxide in the air, but your body would actually rather take in the carbon monoxide, and you'll poison yourself or something.
Okay.
So there's certain ideas, like the idea that that sex and the body are filthy and wrong or something like that are just very attractive for some bizarre, reason or something. I think
separates things out.
Our ancestors sort of say, yes, there's God and all this lofty, and then there's this terrible stuff.
Yeah.
And I love what Swedenborg does with this, where it makes the body and sexuality a very holy thing, a very important thing, deliberately joyful. And then all the mayhem is just the dark side of that. Right. Absolutely, there's a dark side to the huge dark side to the whole thing.
The abuses of all that.
The abuse of all that, right? Really bad. But that doesn't mean the thing is bad.
Right.
That's just the bad version, And there is a good version. Yeah. And he talks about people. He's quite eloquent. He drew some fire from people for saying that there's this wonderful, lovemaking in heaven and all this, where everybody had thought, angels are sexless beings, and they don't, they don't do that, that kind of thing. And so, but the way he describes it is a really wonderful thing, and a wonderful way for an angelic couple to grow closer and closer. It's a really delightful thing.
Yeah, and the reason it's holy is because it's a correspondence of the union of love and wisdom in God, right? I mean, that's how Swedenborg describes it. That's the beauty and the power of it. That's why it's so powerful, says Swedenborg.
And so having something that comes kind of all the way down, whatever you'd say, have that sort of coming together on the outermost layer is like, feels great, that's...
And Swedenborg says that because of that, that the Lord's providence takes special care in leading people towards each other for having for being united. I guess they call it union. There's a one number where he doesn't talk about it being marriage necessary. Or I forget what it is. Anyway, but for getting married, I forget. Anyway, but I wonder about. It makes me think of one story that we covered in 5 Reunions in the Afterlife about, in terms of dates and stuff, is people will spend time with different people because it's even if the Lord is the one leading them, everybody is feeling like they're leading themselves, and that's and so there's definitely going to be getting to know different people or whatever on that path to finding a wife.
We did an episode about this huge account Swedenborg gives of this Russian empress or duchess or something like that, where she has he follows her whole train after, and it's basically like she's doing almost speed dating, where she's going and interacting with, and we did a whole puppet show. Shadow puppet. Go check it out in some episode. But
5 Reunions in the Afterlife.
Was it 5 Reunions in the After? There you go. But in there, it's people who had had a crush on her when she was alive, or they'd had some kind of thing. Yeah. She went and saw them and was like, no, this is the problem with them. There was somebody, and then when it showed her going all over the place, and is that an internet thing? And then in the end, she bumped into this other guy who they hadn't really known each other that much, it seems like, and they kind of went off, and then they bumped into each other again, and then they're like, okay, we fell in love. Yeah. So there's definitely this whole circuit. It's everything that we have here. There's more of there.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And I feel like the last thing I want to say about it is, why would we have a question like this in the first place? It's like the Christian idea of chastity, right? And isn't Swedenborg sort of uncommon? And he talks about chastity a ton, but to him, having a loving relationship, for him, monogamy was the big thing. That is chaste. That's more chaste than being celibate. He says celibacy can actually be a hindrance to your enjoyment of the life of heaven if you get in a certain mindset about it. So anyway, there you go. And thank you for being willing to share that your son has moved on. Hope he's meeting some really nice people there. Okay, let's do the next question. Dora Eaton asks, why does the weather or natural disasters kill people? Which is a really great question. I know this show is called Good Question, but that really gets at a very particular, sort of human resistance to the idea of divine providence, because and in me this is really tough, because I can get, okay, people can be evil, people can abuse their free will, but when like physical accidents happen and that can do something like kill people, it's just like, how is there God in this? What purpose is that serving? So I don't know. This is gonna be a tough one for us to untangle, but it's a great question. We're one step of the way there. We've got a good question to start it with.
We might leave it there.
Yeah, right. So that's all the time we have for today. So does anybody want to lead off?
I'll take a crack at it, but I'm thinking of that biblical phrase, and I don't have it memorized exactly, but it's something like all the days were known. When we were in the womb, already our days were known when there were none of them yet. And I think that has a spiritual meaning, but I also think it's literally true that the Lord knows the length of our day. He knows when we're born, he knows when we're going to pass away and everything, so that he can manage that whole thing, and he shares that information with angels and so on. So a friend of mine is fond of saying, nothing takes the Lord by surprise. Mm-hmm. And I really like that idea. So it's like, whoa, I didn't see that, flooding coming or something, he knows all about it. And in this world, with this cause and effect on the physical level, there's a whole order to it. And so, if there's an earthquake or there's a flood or a hurricane or something like that, and people are in this position or that position, one thing Swedenborg emphasizes is that God's providence is over every detail. There's no sort of little, it's not like he just wound up the clock and then lets it run and whoops, there was a little bit of fallout or something. Right. It's so precise to me. I don't think I'm ever able to convey this thought, but it amazes me how a storm will come in and one person is okay because they were exactly here, and another person got hurt and another person got killed because they were exactly there. All those details, but there's so many details to all of that, and I think that's all known and it's all taken into account somehow. And the Bible says to us not to fear the first death. The first death is your physical death. There's a second death you need to worry about, which is in the old-fashioned language, damnation or something like that. That's the one to worry about, because what gets unfinished here, we can keep going on the other side. So when a storm rolls through and people die, the Lord sort of got that figured out somehow. It's way beyond my pay grade to understand it. But I think that stuff is known. And I know from some people I've been close to in situations somewhat like that in retrospect they realize that person, like it looked like totally random, tornado hit, bang, they were dead. And yet, wasn't it interesting that 2 weeks before that they had such a deep conversation with you about this, where they were talking about the nature of their life and like they're being prepared. Somebody knows. They don't know. But there's that knowledge is somewhere, and they're being prepared, and it was the right length of time. It was the right time and all that. Even though on a purely earthly level, it looks just insane. The ground opens up and people get swallowed up or something. It just looks insane and out of control. But I love that idea that it's all, it's known so that the Lord can preserve that order.
Right. When we think about death, we talk about what is actually death. If it's like Swedenborg is saying, you have to have afterlife to balance this kind of stuff out. But if it really is this immediate transition into, you're still there, you're still alive. So really, we're looking at people on Earth are the ones who are really suffering in
the
situations
ones left
like
behind.
that, right?
Yep.
Yes,
like this. And so,
no question.
I know in one of our shows we talked about Swedenborg, just in the back of his Journal of Spiritual Experiences, drops this little number that says, here are the 4 reasons why our lives last as long as they do.
Right.
One of them is the use we have to people on Earth, what we can do for people on Earth. The other is the use to ourselves and our spiritual development. The third is the use to spirits and angels, and the fourth is something I forget what it is. It's something along those lines.
I think your use in the spiritual world.
Your use in the right.
Like,
people will say like God needed us something to balance it out. So if you look down that list, like those kind of factors are actually what facilitate our moving here and there. It's not whether you were somewhere at some time,
right?
But
or what the air pressure was doing.
Yeah, even though it seems like you were killed by this, there's really like it's about what's best for everyone, which is really hard. But you can only really think of that when you step back. The other hand, though, which is actually really comforting to me, is like all accidents are from hell. Swedenborg talks about little accidents, evil spirits being around that causes those to happen.
Right.
He talks about diseases. I don't know if he addresses natural disasters, but my understanding is every time there's a flaw in the system, he does talk about people, living in an idyllic state where they know when they're going to die. Everybody dies in old age. You're basically lucid the whole time. You can come back and talk to people. That's how it's supposed to be. So stuff like lives being cut short, people being ripped out, that's hell. Even though it's coming from tectonic plates, where people are, when those shift, whatever it is, that if there wasn't evil, not of those people, but in the entire system, the entire spiritual world, all the way that hell's gravity is messing things up, that would, if everyone was choosing love all the time for all of history, it wouldn't just be like God was just like, well, the hurricane killed people, it's just part of how the world is. There's some hell in that, which to me is comforting because it shows it's not random and it's not it's not God's first choice.
Yeah, there's that wonderful passage, I think is in New Jerusalem, that talks about some things the Lord wills to have happen, and some things he allows because of the rules of his order, and some things he cannot prevent.
Tolerates.
Because of, right, exactly, and so I think any kind of premature death or violent circumstance, whatever, is not the first category. It's not God's will that you die in a hurricane or something, but with the laws of physics and everything else going on, it's just there's going to be some loss of life, and the Lord can work with that. He can carry that soul gently home and all that. So.
Should we try to? We could have time for another one if we want to move on from this one. Okay, thanks, Dora.
For discipline.
Thanks, Dora. Appreciate it. And hopefully this, we love that you're going to ask the really tough questions and just be forgiving to us as we try to engage with them. So let's look at the next one.
Very merciful audience.
Sarah Fu. I am Sarah from Malaysia. I truly enjoyed your sharing, Curtis. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for the Swedenborg Foundation. My question, how do I find my mom in the afterlife? Will she be waiting at the gate? Okay.
Yeah, Swedenborg says that our loved ones, nearest and dearest, are often the ones that are right there to welcome us when we wake up in the spiritual world. So chances are it will be your mom right away. And other family members, and who knows.
Yeah.
So I just had a great aunt pass away, and she's the last of her family of 6. So it was interesting to think of her all of her siblings already on the other side had been waiting for her to come over, and now she's over there, and it's like that's got to be a great reunion.
Isn't the best thing that can possibly happen, like a reunion like that? We're just now talking about how it could be okay, and that there's they are going to have a deeper joy than if there was never death in the first place, and if they've never been a part of them that thought, am I really ever going to see them again? There's this one passage in Swedenborg where he says, I've seen people overjoyed to find that they were still alive, but then also overjoyed to see their friends again, and like that. Oh my gosh, you're really still here. I don't know, it's getting me a little bit.
It's first of all, I just want to say it's very cool to have a question from Malaysia. I don't know what time it is in Malaysia, but I think that's really hip.
Thank you.
And, second thing, as we've mentioned before, maybe that Swedenborg says this principle that thought brings presence and love brings conjunction, like connection,
Union,
partnership or something like that. Yeah. And so love is how to do it. How will you find her? Loving her, thinking of her. That'll do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's miraculous.
Yeah.
A lot of people, but that does it. Boom.
Yeah.
So she'll be right there.
Swedenborg, that reminded me of Swedenborg in a recent episode of something. We do so many episodes where he said, I think it was News from Heaven. He said, I have talked to everybody I knew during their life who had died.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
If that's true, there's got to be a pretty good mechanism for finding even people he knew just a little bit, but he could find them and talk to them. So you're going to find your mom, you know.
Oh, it's like the guy who sells the eels at the grocery store. You know, it's like everybody. You know,
but just so you guys know, it's Swedenborg. I think there's an account of him eating
eel pie.
We think maybe eel at one point. That was a thing.
It's an inside eel joke, but. He says so many other people that I don't think it'd be an exaggeration to say 100,000.
I know.
And so I've thought about that a lot, because you sort of sometimes feel like, well, they're sort of the main other actors in your little play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The people you see all the time. And then there's these little bit characters that just come through in an airport, or, you know, somebody who helps you out when you have a flat tire or something. The idea of seeing them all, pretty astonishing, I think. And so just even the thought of someone, like you'll just think of, it doesn't happen to us now, where suddenly you think of just somebody pops in your mind, you know, like they weren't there a second before, and then you think, oh, I'm thinking all about that person. Interesting. And that's going to facilitate that connection in the spiritual world.
The guy at the fish store. I think I mentioned on this show before that one time I was at the fish store and there was a guy at the checkout who was just really friendly to me and just like really great and really nice. And I remember thinking to myself, like, you never remember little things like that, but try to remember the guy at the fish store was nice to you, because you think back on life and all the bad things and stuff. So I've tried to keep, I don't remember what he looks like or anything, but I just have this memory of like, oh yeah, the Petco and like Roosevelt Boulevard or something. There was a nice guy there. Maybe I'll see him. Maybe he'll be.
I was thinking like the eel thing, and that you were making a connection there, but you're actually
this
fish
is true.
for pets.
This was a real life experience.
This is like fish for pets. I had an aquarium that I was trying.
Fish for dinner.
That I was trying to. I was going to all these different fish stores because I was studying on compatibility and which fish can live happily with which fish. So I was going all around, and I don't even remember if I bought anything that day, but anyway, it'll probably be the situation we came across in the beginning, where it's like, what if someone doesn't want to see you? Because the guy at the fish store is going to be like, who are you? Wait, what?
But you made a real difference to
It can make a difference to be friendly. That's a great story.
Okay, well, I think that's a good spot for us to stop here. And I want to say to all of you, like and subscribe. Please, if you're enjoying this show, that helps our channel, you know, in a myriad ways. Click the bell if you are subscribed, then you'll get updates when we put up new content. And we are about to put up a bunch of great new content. We're going to tell you what's coming up this week, a very special stable of stuff. Right after we send you to a quick donation video. Take this seriously, because we're a nonprofit, and without you guys supporting us financially, we can't just do stuff like this and everything else we do on our channel. So here's an easy way for you to support what we do.
Please consider joining our community of sustaining supporters by going to otle.causevox.com and setting up a recurring monthly donation at a value of your choice. Any amount helps. Our sustaining supporters are the backbone of what we do at Off the Left Eye and allow us to continue to create high-quality programming that nourishes thousands every week around the globe. Your help makes a difference.
Okay. So I told you we're going to talk about what's coming up, and here it is. First, we have this is just the stuff coming up this week. This is News from Heaven. We're going to do Thursday episode, Saturday episode. Thursday is going to be the Lord and the Devil battle inside us. What that means, and then on Saturday, your infinite potential. We'll talk about. Isn't that kind of like the biblical stuff and the self-improvement stuff back to back? Short clips. You guys voted. You said you wanted to see something about a spiritual crisis and something about like attracting like. Again, these two different sides of it. So we're going to do a short clip called "Can a Spiritual Crisis Be Helpful?" and one called "Evil Spirits Make things worse for themselves." That's coming up this week. And next Monday, the next episode in our series, what it's like after you die. What is hell really like? And how does that fit into a picture of a loving God? And how does that all make sense in the way we were talking about before? It's got to make sense. So that's going to be an awesome episode. The following Monday, continuing sort of the hell theme, was Lucifer really an angel who fell from heaven? We're going to explore that. And I think that's cool and worth doing, because we've seen how many questions just in this episode are about people like, wait a second, what's going on with the Bible stuff? So we'll be digging into
That's
that
right.
there.
And I think that is an audience question, isn't it? Like, did we get that question from an audience?
Those Swedenborgian Life live shows are always based on your questions. So we do this show. We take time to respond to all your comments, even though you guys left a ton of comments this weekend. We really do try to talk to you, because without you being here and watching, we wouldn't have anything. So thanks to all of you.
Yeah,
thanks.
Good
fun
fun,
to
Curtis.
be here.
Super fun, and we'll see you very soon in all those programs that I just mentioned.